Hey there pen fans, Brian Goulet here from gouletpens.com, and today I want to talk to you about the Pilot Con-70 because there has been a small change to this Con-70 converter. Now this converter is not used in every pen, so it won't affect everybody, but I at least want to clarify some of what's going on. So let's talk about what the Con-70 even is. You have three different converters that Pilot uses in their pens. First one is the Con-B. This is a squeeze converter that comes in things like the Pilot Metropolitan and the Pilot Parallel. Then you have the Con-40, which is their more common one that you see in most of their pens like the Vanishing Point and the Resin Falcon. And then lastly, you have the Con-70, which can come standard in some of their larger pens, the Custom 74, and a lot of the Miki pens, the Custom Urushis, and so on. Now the Con-70 has the highest ink capacity of all three of the converters, so when you can use the Con-70 converter, it's kind of advantageous to do so. It also fills unlike any other converter. It has this push button filling, which is kind of unique and definitely special amongst Pilot, but amongst all converters really. All right, so let's compare the old Con-70 to the new Con-70. Now the old one's been available for quite some time, and we saw it on, a few different models of pens up until around February of 2020, which is when Pilot manufacturing began switching over to the new one. That said, I didn't actually see the new converters coming on pens in the US until around February, March of 2021. So it took almost a full year before we started to see these converters actually coming on pens, and it's going to be a rolling change. There's going to be existing stock of the old ones, they're going to be on pens, some are going to be spare. It's going to be really elongated and take probably a couple of years before you're going to start to see it fully transition to the new one. Fundamentally, these converters, it's not that big of a change. It's very iterative, but there are some important similarities, and I know how much it matters to some of you all. So that's why I wanted to make this video to talk about what's the difference between the old and the new one, and then how you can use the new one since that's what's going to be available going forward. So looking at the old one and the new one, there are some similarities and there are some differences. The similarities are that they hold the same amount of ink, about 1.1 milliliter of ink capacity. The overall size of the converters is the same, the opening is the same, it'll fit on and in the same pens that they always have. Keeping in mind, of course, it's a proprietary converter, so it's only going to fit on certain models of Pilot and Miki pens. Now for the differences. The first one is that the button is going to be a little bit less pressure to fill on the new one. They wanted to lighten up it a little bit to make it a little easier to fill, I guess. Also on the button itself, it's got this indentation in the top in the design instead of these kind of concentric rings. Really doesn't make that much of a difference, but maybe a bit of texture, a bit of aesthetic if you care about that kind of thing on the button of your converter. And then also on the button, it has these small slots on two sides as opposed to being perfectly round as the old one was. If you hold the two beside each other, you'll notice that there's a slight difference in the height in which the piston, the rubber part that actually creates the vacuum seal when you're going to use the converter, it seats on a different part of the converter. It also has an agitator, this metal agitator that rests on the rod and it kind of moves around there a little bit. That's there for a reason. That's to help keep ink from hanging up in the back of the converter as you fill it and as you use the pen. The ink doesn't get hung up there as you're flipping the pen upside down, putting it in your pocket and whatnot. It's supposed to help it to do that. And then also just the general design of the inside of the converter. They have some of these extra, I don't know whether you call them indentations or these raised portions, I guess, on the inside. That's all on the internal part there. That design is meant to help keep ink from hanging up in there. And also I've been told there's a coating on the inside of some kind that's meant to, I guess, have less friction, less, be less grabby for the ink so it goes down. The metal shroud here that holds the button on the old version, it was tight and it was, I think maybe glued on, but you could kind of break it and you could unscrew and take the converter apart for, I guess, ease of cleaning and stuff. It wasn't a huge benefit, but I did find it was helpful at time to time. The new one though, I mean, it'll spin, it'll turn, but it is pressed to fit. I've not yet tried to actually pull it off. If you pull it off, I don't know how well it'll press back on. Basically, it's not really meant to be user serviceable anymore. And then the biggest difference you'll notice isn't something you can necessarily visually see, but it's going to be more nuanced in the way that you actually fill it and the way that you get a full filling with this converter. That's kind of the bulk of what I wanted to talk about in this video today. All right, so let's actually go through and fill using the new Con-70. I'm going to use my handy dandy, trusty, tried and true blue Custom 74, which if you've seen my videos, you know, big fan of this. I'm going to take the new the new Con-70 converter. I'm going to put this on this pen. So this is the one I've had the old one on. This is actually the first gold nib pen that I ever had, in fact. So I'm going to install the new one on here. It's just press to fit. So you just press it right onto the back of the grip there, and then the body and the cap of the pen, you kind of set those aside because all you're going to need is the grip section with the installed converter. So you take whatever bottle of ink you want. I have a bottle of Iroshizuku Konpeki, of course. Love that. But I'm going to show you the back because it's easier to demonstrate it that way. Now, when Pilot says you should fill, especially with the new converter, it's very important that you have it straight up and down. You don't want to have it to the side. You don't want to have it in any kind of weird configuration. And this can be odd depending on the type of ink you have. If you have a bottle where the ink level is really low and you're starting to run out of ink and you have to turn it to the side, you're maybe not going to get as full of filling. So I'm just letting you know what they recommend, but they say it's important to have it straight up and down. You want to submerge the nib. Depending on the design, a pen like the Custom 74 actually has a filler hole that is right here. Actually, it's normally up near where the feed meets the grip section on most pens, but this Custom 74 right here and a couple other pens, Custom 823 on Pilots, actually has a filler hole right here in kind of the middle of the feed. So if you want to be safe, it's good to put it all the way in, but either way, you want to make sure that you're putting enough of the nib unit in where you're actually going to get to the ink, okay? And then you want to press the button repeatedly and slowly is what Pilot recommends. Now you can play around doing it with a couple of different speeds. You might get some air in there. There we go. Now, because it has an easier button to press, I do find you have to have a really firm grip here on the shroud or somewhere on the nib unit, but it doesn't feel quite as treacherous as maybe it was to fill the old one. You still have to grip it pretty good, and I'm trying to demonstrate it as well, so I'm trying to grip it where I'm not hiding anything. You just kind of do it over and over again, and actually, I've gotten a pretty darn good filling here. You're going to have some bubbles in there, that's totally normal. Basically, that is how it's done. Now, truth be told, I have filled it before where it doesn't really fill nearly that much. If you're doing it especially quickly, you may notice that it may not do it quite as effectively. And especially if you have it at an angle, maybe you won't as well. I'm going to give you a demonstration of when you don't have it tilted straight up and down, exactly what's going to happen. So I have it at an angle here, perhaps somewhat of an extreme angle, but I don't think it's too much of an extreme. So I'm going to fill it. I'm going to press the button a few times. And as I'm pressing it here, you're going to see that it's going to fill, but it's not getting a proper seal all the way down there. So it's going to stop me about halfway up the converter. It's going to get some bubbles, and no matter how many times I press it at that angle, it's not going to look like it's filling all the way. However, if I take it and I straighten it out, and I have it straight up and down, and I press it a few more times, it's going to get that proper seal in there, and it should fill all the way. Now, the number of times it takes to do that may vary by pen. I don't know if the grip of each pen is going to matter, but I would say probably 8 to 10 presses. You can pretty much expect to get a full filling. You might have to go a little further than that, but the key is that straight up and down. All right, so now let's talk about if you want to completely max out the filling on your new Con-70. First thing is just use the proper technique, have it straight up and down. You're pretty much going to get a full filling out of it. If you're just not able to do that with your particular bottle of ink, or you're just not able to get the hang of it, that's okay. There are some alternative methods, and I'm going to show you those now. First thing you can do, you can try playing around with your filling speed. You can try slowing it down a little bit, pacing yourself, going a little slower, make sure you're pressing the button all the way before you're letting it go. You can try speeding it up and going a little faster. You're going to get some more air bubbles in there. Make sure you're getting your nib all the way down in there and that you've got it completely submerged in the ink. And then you can try that. If you're just not able to do it, there's some other techniques. Okay, so if you're just frustrated altogether trying to get it filled, you can use an ink syringe. Ink syringe is a great tool for if you have any converter or, honestly, cartridge that you want to refill. You just take your ink syringe. You can fill directly from your bottle of ink. This is really good if your ink level is really low and you can't have it straight up and down. You put that into your converter and then you can use that to fill, of course now my converter's filled with air bubbles, but you can then put as much ink as you desire into your converter. Leave a little bit of space in there so that when you seat the converter onto the grip of the pen, it's got somewhere for that to displace. It might push a little bit of ink, a little bit of air bubbles out of the feed, but then you're basically inked up and ready to go. So this technique also works really well if you want to refill the included Pilot Namiki cartridge. There's one cartridge that comes with the pen, but if you reuse any other cartridges, you can do that. You're not going to get as much ink capacity as you would with the Con-70. You'll get about 0.9 milliliters as opposed to 1.1, but it's still pretty good. So refilling cartridges with an ink syringe is not a bad way to go as well. Okay, then the last but not least technique that you can use is something that requires you to buy something extra that is not an insignificant amount of money, but you can use some sort of traveling inkwell, either like the Visconti traveling inkwell or the Peniter pen filler. These are essentially ink storage, but also ink filling devices. They work in very similar ways. The basic concept is that you are putting the grip of the pen into whatever the device. You're kind of pressing it down into place, and then you're going to fill it actually upside down. And you're going to then depress the converter this way. And in here, you're going to get a maximum filling for sure because you got gravity working on your side. And this is going to work well. Really, this is the best filling mechanism. The best filling method for getting a maximum filling on any filling mechanism that you may possibly have. But specifically for the Con-70 works great. So these new Con-70s, they are going to be a rolling change, and unfortunately, we don't know what's going to be coming on which pen when. So if you're reaching out to a retailer like us at Goulet Pens or anybody else across the world, they're not necessarily going to know what they have, and yes, theoretically, they might be able to open up the box and see what's inside there, but it's just something that we're not going to be able to predictably say you're going to get the new versus the old one, and frankly, they both feel pretty similarly, so I think you're going to be okay. I wouldn't really sweat over which one you're going to get, but at least now you know some of the nuances between the two different versions. So my hope was that this video was going to be able to give you a pretty good idea of what you could anticipate with the new Con-70 converter. It seems like a little thing, it's a converter, but you know, us fountain pen people, this is something that we really get attached to. Filling mechanisms are really important. I personally get really attached to particular filling mechanisms, and the Con-70 is one that I really love because it comes on one of my favorite pens. So I would love to hear if you thought that this video was helpful for you, and if you have any additional questions, you can leave it for us on YouTube, or you can reach out to us at Goulet Pens. Anyway, I hope you like this. Please let us know what you think. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't already. I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for watching, and right on.